Welcome to the Friday edition of Juan's World. I had a surprise on Wednesday. It's a small surprise. My author's copy of my book on Genesis came via courier. And you might be thinking, oh no, he's going to talk about Genesis again. Well, you'd be wrong. I'm not going to talk about Genesis, but I am going to talk about book publishing. And I'm going to talk about it from a personal point of view. So let's get started. Now, a lot of people think they can write a book, and depending on the topic, they probably can. They could write a book about their life, or they could write a fantasy novel, or what have you. And the issue is not whether you can write a book or not. I see quite often, too often for my taste, on YouTube, people saying, oh, your posts are so wonderful, they're so interesting, you should write a book. Well, go ahead. Like, you can write a book about your travels, write a book about your family, write a book about where you live, whatever. I wouldn't recommend academic writing unless you've got the qualifications. But, you know, people sometimes surprise me. But this is the thing. There's a very big difference between writing a book and publishing a book. So writing a book, I mean, it has its challenges. It takes time, and you have to put a lot of effort into constructing it and so forth. But that's one part of the process. The next part is looking out for somebody to publish it for you. And the reason that you really want the book published is that you want it distributed. Now, there are different ways you can think about this. Like, for example, there are some publishers who, if you pay them, will print a certain number of copies of your book. They might even, for another extra fee, edit and all that kind of stuff. You know, that's neither here nor there. We call that vanity publishing. And people do that sometimes because they want to make a limited number of copies. Like, maybe they've got 20 or 30 friends and family that they'd like to distribute a book about a beloved grandmother or something like that. That's okay. I mean, because no commercial publisher is going to touch that. Another way that you can do it is through Amazon's Kindle. And there you don't have to pay anything. You just put the book in the right format and submit it to Amazon, and they put it up on their site as a Kindle book. And if people want to read it, they have to pay for it. And you set the price. And the thing is that Amazon takes a percentage of that price, which is fair because they're providing the computer space. But you don't have one of these, a book you can hold in your hand and open. And now, here I have to say that I'm on the horns of a dilemma a little bit, because I actually do publish online, not with Amazon, with commercial publishers. And I read books online all the time. I have a Kindle account, and if I see a book I want to read, I pull it up on Kindle and read it. A lot of people my age won't do that. A lot of them want to have like a physical object they can hold, they can open it up, they can look at the pages, you know, that, well, that's just the past as far as I'm concerned. I don't care, or at least I don't care a lot. But let's get back to the publishing issue first, and then we'll get on to the physical copy complexity. That if you want to have some kind of trade publisher publish your book, then you got a lot of work ahead of you. You've got to put together a description of the book, some sample pages, a table of contents, or if it's a let's say a cookbook, and you've got to have your own resume and a bunch of, I mean, different presses. Yeah, I can't generalize. Different presses ask for different things. Some of them ask for just a letter of inquiry. Some of them ask for, you know, a prospectus with all those things in it, your own bio, and all manner of things. And then you have to sort of like cast your bread upon the water. You know, you just have to, you construct an email, because publishers don't want physical copies anymore, or at least not many of them. Some of them still do, but most of them want electronic submissions. You have to figure out who you're going to submit to. Like, let's say you're writing a children's book and you go to Ballantine, then you go to their website and you look and you find, like, who is the acquiring editor for children's books specifically. You don't want to just send it out into the great maw of Ballantine in general. So you get an address and hopefully a person's name, not always, but sometimes. You've put together all of your materials as I was going to say as neatly as possible, but that's certainly true. I mean, you really cannot have any spelling or grammar mistakes in your proposal, because they will just reject it out of hand. No questions asked. That's how I used to be when I was the head of a department at a university in New York. I used to usually, you know, every year or so have an opening for a teacher of some sort. I might be a professor, might be an adjunct, whatever. But I would put it out in the classifieds, various places, and I'd usually get 200 letters of inquiry back. Well, when you've got limited time and a certain amount of limited interest also, 200 letters of introduction plus resume is a lot to get through. So you put the initial inquiries through what's called a long list, which you have to cut down to your short list, of course, but you start with a long list. And what that is that you throw out any resume that, you know, shows the person isn't qualified, all kinds of things that just get rid of the junk, if you like. I mean, when I used to apply, I used to advertise an opening, I would get people who had no academic qualifications at all. You know, I wanted a person with a cultural anthropology PhD. So, like, if you don't have that, in the bin, don't care. You know, if you do all kinds of things, you go in the bin, and one of them is an absolute guaranteed. Any spelling mistakes, any grammar mistakes, in the bin. No questions asked. And that's how, or not how, it's one of the things that acquiring editors consider. You know, so So you put your materials together and you make triple sure that everything is correct. And then you send it off into the ether and wait. And with the vast majority of trade presses anyway, if they're not interested, they won't reply. And, which I find rather rude. I'm not rather rude, I find it incredibly rude that you spend all this time putting this thing together and they've spent a certain amount of time reading it, and they don't have the courtesy to send you boilerplate even. Now, boilerplate means it's, it's your standard refusal letter. Thank you very much for your inquiry. We found the work very interesting, but it doesn't meet our needs right now. How you write that, it takes you 5 minutes to write it, and you use it 10,000 times just by replying, just telling people we're not interested. So I've got about 15 proposals out right now, and 10 of the people I've written to have not responded at all. And that probably means that most, if not all of those 10 are not interested and don't have the courtesy to reply. But anyway, you do all that. And you have to just wait for the rejections to come in. I mean, then they come in. If in other words, if the publisher doesn't respond because they're not interested, if they do send you boilerplate, then you'll get a lot of them. I used to have a folder that contained about 300. This is back in the days before the internet, when people were sending letters. I used to have a proposal envelope, with all of my rejections. And before I left the United States, I had about 350 rejection letters in it. I would say that since I've been actively doing this, since living in Southeast Asia, I've probably received something of around 70 rejections. That's pretty standard, and I've got a pretty good resume. I mean, I've published 12 books, so it's not like I'm a newcomer who's just like throwing stuff out to see what sticks. They know that my work is noted, and I have been published by really high quality publishers. So they're not like indies across the river where you have an inn. I mean, these are big publishers. I'm not going to mention them. Vanity. But the thing is that, like eventually you get accepted. And when you get accepted, you've got another long road to go. I mean, super long. Now, I'll talk a little bit about that road with this book. This book was commissioned 20 years ago. It's commissioned for a series by a small press that mostly published textbooks, but also published work in a number of social sciences. And one of the series editors there was interested in putting out books of anthropology for the popular market. She was thinking in terms of, putting these books in airport bookshops and so forth. And we got all the way to like the final copy, and the press that she was working for was taken over by a much bigger press, and it was only a textbook press. It didn't publish anything else. But I was under contract at that point, and because they had acquired the small company, that contract was grandfathered in to the larger one. But they didn't want to publish my book. So they just dithered around. They said, no, we don't want it, but we're not going to tell you. At a certain point, they just refused to answer anything. They wouldn't answer phone calls, they wouldn't answer emails, they wouldn't answer anything. So in the end, I gave up. I mean, it actually, well, it's more complicated than that. I was under contract to them, so I was required to submit something to them, and they were in theory required to publish, but what they were doing was just a lot of foot dragging, because they really didn't want to publish it. But they also didn't want to release me from the contract, which was really not fair. So after about 3 years, I got released from the contract. And then I started trying to sell the book to other publishers. And that's where a great many of the 350 rejection letters came in. I mean, they just rejected it over and over and over. So after a while, I just gave up. But then I got back on the saddle again. It was just about when I came to Cambodia, so it's about 7 years ago. And a press that publishes anthropology in England accepted the book. So, woo! Well, then, once it's accepted, you then have to go through copy editing and all kinds of just technical stuff. You know, like they'll say, okay, you know, the bibliography's in the wrong format, or we need different styles of various sorts. But eventually they get to the point where they can print books and send you copies, and that's the part that is kind of like my lead story in a way. It's like I get really excited by having my own book in my own hands. And you're not gonna like quite get it right. I'm not excited because, woohoo, I've published a book. You know, like, I've done a lot of that. It's this weird phenomenon of opening the book, you know, open it up, and I'll start reading, and I'll say, this is a good book. And I don't mean that to be immodest. I mean, it feels like who wrote this? I mean, there's some divide between my actual process and the final product. It's like the final product has become its own thing. It's become separate from me. But there's also another phenomenon, and I'm not sure how to describe this, but like one of the books that I wrote many years ago, I wrote in the foreword that it felt like it wrote itself. And that seems strange, right? It's like, because I was the one sitting at the keyboard. But it's just like just the ideas all came together and they poured out. I wrote them all down. And that is the phenomenon that the ancient Greeks used to call having a muse. Like it's some spirit that is imposing itself on you, and you are just compelled. Well, that's kind of how that felt. This one, not so much, although in places it did. And that's why I think there is this divorce between the mode of production and the final product. Because now that I read it, I look, you know, I mean, I know it just sounds so vain, but it just feels like, gosh, my muse, not me, my muse is wonderful. and the book is wonderful. So it's the kind of thing that you cannot get with an e-book, you know, or anything online. It has to be something that's in your hands, and so it's like it's it's no longer a part of you. It's now out in the world. But anyway, that's the long version of today's excitement. If you like my videos, please tell your friends. Please like, please subscribe, and I'll see you on Tuesday. Not sure what I'm going to be doing because I'm I'm back in the saddle, doing a lot of writing and editing and formatting and goodness knows what else. So I don't know.